Someone knocked on our door at 11 p.m. This just happened just under a year ago. I had just broken up with my boyfriend, and he had moved out of our house, and my mom was staying with me temporarily for emotional support. We were sitting in my small living room at about 11 p.m. one night when there was a succession of panicked, loud knocks on my front door downstairs. My mom and I both jumped, and she gave me a weird look, but went downstairs to answer it anyways. She ventured down the stairs, trying to catch a glimpse of whoever was knocking through the window beside my front door. When she was closer, she saw a man, about 6'2", wearing a tight white t-shirt. He was muscled and well-shaven, and seemed to be grinning at the closed door. She opened it gingerly, and we could get a better look at him. He was sweating bullets despite the fact it was a cool November night, and his eyes were open unnaturally wide, and he was still grinning. He spoke immediately. "Hi, I'm sure you don't know me, but I'm actually in a bit of a pickle here. I'm really hoping you can help me." It was at that moment that I come up behind my mom, and his eyes alighted upon me with his grin stretched wider. "I know her!" I was nonplussed and more a little unsettled. I had never seen this man in my life. His reaching out to shake my hand right afterwards, despite knowing me, didn't help. He kept talking, faster now. "I'm Brian from next door. My key snapped off in my lock, and I can't get into my place. I just really need some help here." My mom cut in here. Do you need me to call someone for you?" He shook his head immediately. No. I just really need some help, you know?" My mom was done at this point and said in a level voice that she was going to go upstairs for a moment, and then quickly closed and locked the door. We went straight upstairs and looked out the window that overlooked the street my house was on. He must have stood at my doorstep for a good 5 minutes before booking it down the street. He didn't go next door, so Brian from next door. Let's not meet. Don't give strangers rides, no matter how sad their story is. One night, at about 6:30, my friend and I went to the local grocery store downtown. It's a college town, so this is just a little market for students. We went in and got our groceries no problem. The parking lot has limited spaces because of downtown parking issues, but we had a 30-minute limit and only used about 20 getting groceries, so we decided to walk over to the game shop next door. A few minutes later, we headed back to my car. It was early November and freezing cold outside. The parking lot was crowded with other cars trying to back out, so we were waiting on that when a woman appeared at the passenger window where my friend was sitting. Now, my friend is male to female transgender, so the hormone she takes tends to make her look like 16 instead of 25. I also look pretty young for my age. I know it's typical downtown for homeless people to pick out young-looking girls and ask for money, etc., you know? So, we roll down the window and this woman is frantic, waving a cell phone around, asking us if we can give her a ride to the bus transfer point on the south side of town, about a 15-minute drive away. She says she missed her bus, the number X bus, at whatever time, and has to get to the transfer point or her kids are going to be taken away from her. I said, "No, sorry, ma'am," because first, the lady is creepy in general, and second, I don't think it's our responsibility to be a taxi service to every person with a sad story. She asked us again, begging really, saying, "They're gonna take away my kids, please help me." I look at my friend and she just gave me an eye roll and shook her head. Then the woman answered her phone and started talking to someone like, "Yeah, I know. I'm trying to get a ride there, please don't take them." She was obviously lying. We could see her phone screen, and it wasn't on an active call at all. At this point, I was done with her, and I apologized again and started to back out. My friend rolled up her window, and we tried to back out, but the lot was small, and there was another car we had to wait for. The woman was following our car saying, "Please," and then tried to open the back passenger door of my car and started pounding on the window. I was like, hell no, and thankfully it was locked and we could drive away then, and we just booked it home. On the drive home, my friend was like, "Yeah, the bus she said she missed doesn't even stop at that bus stop. It runs a completely different route." So, creepy lady at the grocery store, not cool. Let's not meet again. A frustrated peeping Tom entered my home. Hey all, this is my first ever post on Reddit. Much like a lot of posters on Let's Not Meet, I've lurked and decided perhaps my story was worthy of submission, so here it goes. This took place in November of 2007, during my junior year of high school in my hometown. I lived in a small Midwestern city that, in all honesty, seemed completely safe. One night, my two friends and I were hanging out at my house in the living room. We stopped by my house after we had gone to a local coffee shop, but we wanted to leave again to get a late-night Jimmy John's. I'll try to paint a picture of my living room to the best of my abilities. The couch was against the front windows. There were 3, and the curtains only slightly obscured 2 of them, facing our inactive fireplace. There was a small nook right next to the fireplace that held a large plush green chair. The chair faced the front windows, and was directly next to our entertainment center. The house had 2 main entrances, the front door, which no one used and was perpetually blocked, and the side door, which was attached to the kitchen. The first floor of our house was basically one long hallway, each room leading to the other through large archways and no doors. On this night in particular, our friends and I decided to watch TV before heading out again. It was around midnight. I was sitting in the green chair and my friend were laying on the couch facing me. I could tell the other 2 were falling asleep, and decided I rest my eyes as well. A moment later, my cat burst into the room and up the stairs. I didn't think much of it, as she was a skittish cat, so I shut my eyes again. The next thing I know, I hear my friend whispering my name over and over and over again. I turned my head towards her, and she was pointing in the direction of my dining room. From my point of view, I couldn't see the entrance to the dining room, as I was tucked in the nook by the fireplace. My friend was persistent, and her voice grew louder and louder, until I decided I couldn't avoid looking. I scooted up to the very edge of the seat, peered over, and holy shit, a man was standing there. He was scrawny and short and wore a ski mask, and that's it. This dude was completely and utterly naked, and he just stood there completely calm, taking turns at staring at each of us. I could also see he was carrying a bundle under his arm. We all looked at each other for a few beats. My heart was racing. What the fuck was happening? Was this a joke? Should we charge him? What if he was carrying a gun or a knife? After those brief moments were over, we all started screaming. I don't know if I've ever screamed so loud in my life. I took off towards the stairs, and as I reached them and looked back, I saw him calmly turn and walk back towards the dining room. We reached my parents' room, flung ourselves in, and barricaded the door. My parents, who were asleep before, woke up in a panic, and we all started screaming about what had just taken place. The calmest of the 3 of us managed to call 911, and within 20 minutes, there were squad cars outside of our house. They took our individual statements and searched the property. One cop came back inside after searching our property and the surrounding neighborhood. He told us that there are distinct footprints in the frost directly in front of our living room windows. They surmised that he had been standing there for hours trying to get our attention and, frustrated, entered our house after those failed attempts. We stupidly left the door unlocked because we assumed that we'd be leaving soon after arriving. I honestly had no idea if they ever caught this man. When I was still living in my hometown, I would be at a random store and I think I saw him because honestly, I remember his goddamn eyes so well. They were completely devoid of any emotion. So, creepy, ski-masked, naked, peeping Tom, let's not meet ever again. Oh, and always lock your damn doors. Andy. A few years ago, my brother-in-law bought another apartment complex in Florida. He owns a few apartment complexes in West Palm Beach, Miami. So when he had told me he bought another one and wanted me to manage it, I figured why the hell not? I just graduated college with my degree and planned to go get my master's, so I figured I could manage his place and do graduate school, right? When he booked my flight to Orlando, I was stoked, heck yes. I love Disney and I dreamed about buying a year pass and checking out all the neat parks. Then, when I got there, We drove out of Orlando, and I had a bad feeling. He bought the apartments in a town called Leesburg. It's only an hour or so from Orlando. If a biker town and a retirement community had a baby, that was it. I was a little disappointed that I was an hour from Orlando, which is nightlife, clubs, and whatnot. I made it work though and soon settled into life, managing a small apartment complex. I had my own one-bedroom apartment in the corner, and then there were 10 other tenants. Most were older folks, snowbirds and retirees that spent their days golfing and swimming in the pool we had. There were 2 military families, one with small kids. Then there was Andy. Andy was an enormous man. I'm a pretty big guy, 6'4", 250 pounds, but he was at least 6'6" and 400 plus pounds. He walked with a cane and had long black hair he put in a ponytail. He worked from home, or so he said, but rumor was that he was on disability after a horrible work accident. I really didn't care. He paid his rent on time. He was quiet and he kept to himself. I was only in his place once, when his AC cut out, and to my surprise, he was pretty neat. No food containers or pizza boxes, beer cans, etc. that I expected a big guy like him to have laying out. Things in our complex went pretty good for the next year, until one night in November. It was raining, like it always does in Florida, and it was about midnight when someone rang my doorbell. So I looked out and saw one of my tenants, Joseph. Joe was one of my retirees who retired to Florida to, in his words, play golf and drink beer. Normally he was all smiles and jokes, but that night his face was pale and he looked frightened. I hate to bother you, Sam, but something ain't right with Andy. I put my jacket on and followed him to his apartment. Since Andy was his neighbor, he put his finger to his lips and motioned for me to listen. I put my ear up to the door and heard Andy fighting with someone. It sounded like whomever he was fighting with was throwing things. I was taken aback as he had never had a guest over ever in the year that he lived there. So I knocked, and I heard him stomped over to the door and opened it. He looked... Normally, he was very well dressed, put together, and like I said, he wasn't a messy guy, but he answered in a shirt that had grease stains. His hair was limp and greasy, and he smelled like B.O. I peered in and behind him, and saw his place was a disaster. I asked if everything was okay. He was irritated, and told me it was, and pretty much shut the door in my face. I sent Joe back into his place, and told him to let me know if he heard anything else, and went to bed. The next morning, I decided to pay Andy a visit to see if he was okay, and so I went by his place and knocked. No answer, so I decided I would try back later. Got busy doing other things and then forgot all about it. December rolls around, and I'm starting to get monthly rent checks. Nothing from Andy. That got me a bit worried. He was always on time with his checks. So I knocked on his door. Nothing. I knocked again, and I heard grunting and moaning. Now, I should have called the police first, but I didn't. I opened the door with my key ring and was hit with the foulest smell ever. It smelled like piss, shit, vomit, and B.O. all rolled into one nasty smell. The walls were streaked with what I assumed was shit, and the place was thrashed. I started calling for Andy while dialing 911, and I hear the moaning from the back bedroom. I can never unsee what I saw ever. To this day, I get flashbacks. Andy was naked and laying on the floor of his room on some dirty clothes. He was covered in his own shit and piss, and there were piles of vomit on the carpet. That was bad. But what was the cincher was that he was covered in bites, human bites, all over his arms, legs, and they were starting to smell with infection. He was also bleeding from his rectum. I wondered who attacked him. Was it the woman we heard him fighting with? I didn't get my answers until a few days later. He had been rushed to the hospital and was fighting for his life in the ICU. The doctors talked to his sister, who turned out to be his medical guardian, and things slowly came into place. Turns out, Andy did that to himself. He suffered from multiple mental disorders. He stopped taking his meds in the month before November. There was no other person. That night, he was arguing with himself. Those bites he inflicted himself. The bleeding in his rectum from inserting a foreign object in there, and doing so much damage it ruptured his internal organs. He ended up pulling through and went home to live with his sister. I had the task of cleaning his apartment, and what I found while cleaning pretty much freaks me out as much as finding him. He had shoebox full of cutouts from magazines, old family photos, and even photos he obviously took of the residences of the apartment, including myself. All the eyes were burnt out with cigarettes, and some of them X's were put over the mouth. I'm not sure if that was part of his mental decline, or if he was always that creepy and I just never noticed it. All I know is Andy, let's not meet again. That's not a fox. I wanted to post my story here for a few months now, so here we go. PS M18, November last year, me and my friend decided to drive my car up to Scotland to do some fishing and eventually make our way to Edinburgh. After the first day of catching some salmon and brown trout, we stored our catches in the cooler box. After contemplating whether to sleep in the car tonight, as we left it quite late to set up camp, around 4:30ish, the sun was already going down. Eventually I said, let's set up a fire and cook the fish. I didn't drive all the way to Scotland to sleep in the car. My friend agreed as we set off looking for a spot to camp. We found a little wooded area next to a car park near a farm, and we looked into it prior, and apparently you can basically camp anywhere in Scotland as long as you left the place as you found it. So we grabbed all our shit out of the car and started setting up our campsite. 20 minutes later, we have a fire going, 2 fold-up chairs and 2 tents up. We were glad we chose to camp out instead of sleeping in the car, as we smoked a few joints. We talked about school life, etc. in the past. My friend struggled to keep his eyes open as I checked my phone. 2 a.m. He called it a night, crawling into his tent and zipping it shut. I sat there with my feet up on my friend, now empty seat, listening to the sounds of the wildlife. I shut off the torch we had hung up on a tree next to us, leaving me in darkness, apart from the burning embers from the coal. It must have been 3 or so minutes before I started to hear the crunching of leaves and the snapping of twigs that seemed to be coming towards me. Being quite a rational person, I passed it off as a fox drawn to the scraps of food we may have left lying around. I was quickly proven wrong when I heard a sniffle, like someone with a coal clearing their nose. My high quickly turned from chilled out to paranoia as I feel a heavy dread come over me. My mind raced, why the fuck is someone out here in the woods at 2 to 3 a.m. in the morning? Why are they coming towards me? I slowly reached down to my pockets and felt my heart drop as I didn't feel the smooth blade of my pocket knife. Shit, I must have left it in my tent. All the while I hear the treading coming closer and closer, my heartbeat racing. Out of the darkness, I see a middle-aged man, clean-shaven, parted hair around 5'10", slowly creeping towards me almost on all fours, like a predator trying to stay out of sight. I sat there paralyzed and unable to speak. My mouth was that dry I could hardly swallow. That's when I realized he hadn't even seen me. Being under a tree with no light source, I must have blended in. Also, with there only being one tent in view, I guess he thought my friend was the only one camping here. He got closer to the tent and half breathed and half whispered, "Come on, do it," in a raspy voice. Creeped the fuck out and unable to bear the thought of what he'd do next, I said, "Oi, can I help you?" He jumped up in shock and his whole demeanor changed. He looked at me mumbling awkwardly as he scurried back out of the woods. I sat there still trying to comprehend what happened when I saw the headlights of a car turn on and drive away. I woke my friend, and he could tell how shook up I was. With a full explanation, he willingly grabbed all our gear, and we slept in the car that night with the doors locked. Sorry if there's any mistakes or anything like that. I used my phone to type this whole thing out. Any questions, I'll try to respond as quickly as possible. So you attend college, right? And your grades are passing? Not for long. No matter how many spaces I add between each paragraph, they won't show up. Help. Anyways, this is a little story about a creep. A creep who thought he had all the power in the world. A creep who probably had a horrific childhood, but a creep nonetheless. Anyways, I first befriended this creep online back in 2011. Facebook, of course. We had mutual friends I trusted, so I assumed he was a cool guy. Well, that's a terrible assumption to make about strangers, whether they are mutual friends or not. But I was a naive 18-year-old girl. His name was Danny. I thought he was a cool guy at first. He had an awesome taste in music, and he shared a lot of great songs with me. He was also incredibly inappropriately hilarious. He was full of jokes and bizarre stories, and soon I grew to love talking to him. He never asked if I had a boyfriend. I assumed he knew I did. After all, we were Facebook friends now, and there were pictures of my boyfriend everywhere, and it's not like I kept my relationship status hidden. It was right there for all to see. But I guess he didn't know. One day in October, he decided to tell me how he felt about me. He recited a poem he'd written, compared me to a beautifully and elegantly handcrafted tapestry. Keep in mind, I never even met the guy, and we'd only been talking for a month or so. I responded with something along the lines of, "Wow, I wish my boyfriend said stuff like that." He got angry. So angry. He asked me how I could have let him on like this. He asked me how I could do this to him. He told me he had opened his heart to me. He begged and pleaded. Supposedly, he cried. I was beyond puzzled. I decided to give him some space, and it worked for a few days. But he eventually messaged me again. He may have apologized, but I honestly can't remember that exact conversation. I do know that things returned to normal. He became silly and fun again. At this point, I had a Skype, and he had mine. I would talk to him there sometimes, but I never used the camera. I didn't feel comfortable with it. Actually, I hated using the camera with anyone. I told him that when he started to beg me to use it, but he didn't relent. Still, I kept making excuses more and more. Danny wasn't having it. He got more aggressive, and then he got sexual. He told me to Skype naked with him. Time after time, I told him no. Eventually, I blocked him on Skype, but ended up receiving dozens of angry messages on AIM. I don't exactly remember what he said, though I do have screenshots of it on an external hard drive somewhere. I remember it being hateful and absolutely insane. And there was some stuff about me being a really awful friend as well. Before long, he told me he was a very excellent hacker. He told me that he had a whole slew of hacker friends as well. He told me that he could change my college grades and make me fail. He told me he would make my life a living hell. I didn't necessarily believe it all, but I did believe he would do something. Despite these negative confrontations, we still had periods of silliness. During these periods, things were normal. I felt safe, to an extent. I tried to keep him happy. I wanted to stay in his good graces, because I really did believe he would attempt to tarnish my reputation otherwise. Before long, he started giving me ultimatums. Either you get on Skype with me, or things will get very bad for you. I can tell your boyfriend you're cheating on him. I eventually asked our mutual friends about him. They said he was violent, dangerous, and twisted. Even better, he lived mere minutes away from the college we attended. Every day, I started getting more panicked about going to school. While on campus, I looked around for guys that looked like him. Guys with long red hair and beards. And I'd be very wary of anyone who slightly resembled him even. At this point, I was honestly convinced he'd just show up and try to find me. I had blocked him on AIM, and I made a new Skype. I knew this would infuriate him, and it did. I received another batch of messages on Facebook about how I need to learn to treat people better. I told him I was uncomfortable with what he was asking of me. He responded with something along the lines of, "Fine, you've chosen your fate." I blocked him on Facebook. I've had enough of him terrorizing me. But I should have known. It wouldn't be the last I heard from him. At the end of November, I received 3 Facebook messages from someone named Adam Knowing. Whoever he was, he just joined Facebook a couple days ago, and he had no friends or content. The messages read as follows. November 27, 2011. You've been warned repeatedly, and you are now being served notice. November 29, 2011. I believe this is your last warning, and that you have been informed of your behavioral issues. The situation will change before the start of the next weekend, or action will be taken. November 30th, 2011. So you attend college, right? And your grades are passing. Not for long. You are warned on how to treat him and how you are to act. You've got until this week's end to correct this behavior, or life becomes a very difficult thing. You should never treat someone who has a life like his the way that you do. To this day, I'm not sure who Adam Knowing was. It could have been Danny, or it could have been one of his low-life hacker friends. Either way, I was terrified at the time, and against my better judgment, I unblocked Danny on Facebook. By now, my boyfriend was aware of this whole situation, and he suggested that I had to call the police if things got any worse. Maybe I should have. But Danny hadn't officially done anything to me. What could they do? Still, I took screenshots of all his screen names. I saved our chat logs on AIM. I took screenshots of all his threatening messages. I saved it all to my folder just in case I needed evidence. Danny's nonsense continued right through Christmas. Some days he'd be sweet and funny. Others he'd be back to being angry and pressuring. I promised him a Skype session to calm him down, but I kept using my schoolwork as an excuse to delay it. Shortly after Christmas time, I blocked him again on all accounts. I decided I would deal with whatever repercussions came with. If I did end up getting hacked, at least I had the evidence, right? A couple of weeks went by, and nothing happened. Then I received a Facebook message from another account I did not recognize. I don't remember this one, but I remember the message. After careful consideration, you're being let go. You may want to do the respectful thing and thank the one who you have wronged. It is thanks to his compassion that you are being forgiven so easily. I blocked the account immediately. In January of 2012, something magical happened. I woke up one morning to the news that Danny had been arrested. The charges? Possession. A bunch of his creepy friends have been arrested with him, having been involved as well. In 2013, Danny was indicted. He was looking at up to 60 years, which will make him almost 90 when he gets out. Even if he is released early, he'll be supervised for the rest of his life. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to post a link to the news story, but it is online. I guess being a monster creep catches up with you eventually. People watching my house? My boyfriend and I moved into a house last year. It was in the summertime. The home sits on a farm, but has not been used as a farm for some years now. It's over 100 years old and sits just outside city lines, so we have no nearby neighbors. Just the highway about 200 feet from the front door, and across the highway, a small group of really big, nice houses. The house is owned by an investment firm that my mom works for, so we get a great deal on rent, and the landlord is always out of our hair. This house is known around the area pretty well by the small neighboring communities. The previous owners were rich and had a prominent standing in the community, so most people refer to it as the Buchanan House, the Buchanan being their last name. Mr. Buchanan died, presumably on the lot, maybe 5 or 10 years ago. And then close relatives of them, a couple named Larry and Donna, rented the place. Then, when they left, the house was abandoned for close to a year. Once we moved in, we could tell people were interested in us. We moved into the Buchanan house, that stuff. We put out onto the highway the same times as someone from the other side. They would stare at us a little longer. A few weeks in staying here, we noticed a man in a white station wagon stopping along the highway and staring in our direction. My little brother had noticed him at least 3 times on 3 different days staring. The last time I saw him stopping and staring, I was sitting on the front porch. After he had been there for maybe 2 minutes, I decided to wave at him to let him know that I saw him, because I was getting a little angry. As soon as I waved, he bolted up the hill and disappeared into the neighborhood. We chalked it up to him being interested in who was living here now, and thought he must live up the hill. More recently, in late November, we had a man come and look for the previous residences, Larry and Donna. He was an old man, with stacks of paper in his hand, and he was adamant about finding them. My boyfriend and I told him that they didn't live here anymore. We had been living here for months. But he did not believe us. He reluctantly left, after sitting in his car in my driveway for 15 minutes. We assumed he was here to serve the previous residents with legal papers or something like that. The most recent and most creepy instance happened last week. My boyfriend was home working out in the living room listening to music, and he noticed a red Dodge truck stop in the same spot as the white station wagon. He remembers the truck was there more than 3 song lengths, probably no less than 10 minutes time. My boyfriend got suspicious pretty fast and took his scope off of his BB gun to get a better look at the guy. He was staring right into our living room window. But as soon as my boyfriend went to see if he could get the plate number, the guy kicked it into gear and went up the same road up the hill, almost hitting someone in the process. I got home from school a few hours later and was disturbed by yet another person creeping on us. So he drove up the hill to see if the guy lived at any one of the houses up there or was waiting to come back down. I wanted to get his plate number in case we came back to an empty home one day. We did not find the red truck, but I did find out that there is another outlet on the other side. Over time, we keep getting Larry and Donna's mail. I opened what I got today, and it was a court summons. They're being sued for $5,000, so it makes sense about the old man looking to serve them papers, but could the people watching the place be debt collectors, lawyers, rough-em-up guys, trying to get their money or gain information on our living habits? I mentioned the house is owned by an investment firm, so it could be investors keeping tabs on the property, but I don't know. Our house is basically in the middle of nowhere, so I feel vulnerable at times. Has anyone heard of debt collectors doing this? Or am I being paranoid for nothing? Thanks for reading. A snowblower. Some backstory. I used to live in the Canadian countryside. We had a big home with a massive 2-car garage and a huge hand-built shed in our backyard. We got lots of snow starting from November to March, along with a 200-foot driveway, determined a need for this nice snow-blowing machine. We kept our snowblower in the shed through during the summer as it took up space. I was about 6 or 7 years old when this happened. My father worked in the city, so occasionally he would just sleep there instead of coming home. So it'd be just me and my mom, whom at the time was sick with lung cancer. I actually slept through this entire encounter, but it still freaks me out because how freaked out my mom was. Apparently around 4 a.m., my mom heard the alarm beep. So she freaked out and made sure I was still in my room and got a knife from the kitchen. She looked out her bedroom window and saw 2 men walking across the yards towards our shed. A motion detector light turned on when they got to the shed, but she couldn't see what they were doing. They managed to cut the cut and open the doors. They then started wheeling our snowblower through the backyard around the house and into the back of their truck, where they had stolen several other snowblowers. My mom had already called the police, but they informed her that it may be a while for a unit to show up. Luckily, an officer was just cruising down our street when we called, and they caught them before they even left the driveway. This creeped me out because they got inside of our garage and just left the door open, then casually walked to our shed and tried stealing our snowblower, all while I slept. Followed by a rapist. First time poster here, long time lurker. My story took place last November in a large city in the southern USA. Needless to say, it's now the reason I have a concealed carry permit. I was leaving my office alone last November very late at night. I work with a very exclusive clientele, including many celebrities and high-level executives, so late nights often are common. There's a gas station across from my office and an international airport close by, so this is a well-lit, busy area with a fire department next door. I pulled into the gas station to get some gas, as I live about 45 minutes from my office and have no problems. Get to the red light and turn on to the busy bypass around the city, and there's an Infiniti G35 following behind me. No worries, it's a busy intersection, and the car was at the gas station with me, so I brush it off. I keep driving, and I started noticing every time I switch lanes, so did the driver of the Infiniti. I was getting a little unnerved, but thought maybe he was using me as a speed shield, as the cops are really heavy on that particular road. So I slow down and move to the right lane. He follows. He's staying behind me and riding my bumper. Okay, weird. I get off at the next exit, not mine, but I really couldn't shake the feeling he was following me. I pull into the gas station, and sure enough, he pulls in the spot next to me. At that point, I slam my car in reverse and nope the hell back on the bypass. I look in my rear view, and he's hot on my heels. I get off at the next exit and make a series of random turns, taking back roads to the interstate, and sure enough, he's still following me. By this point, I'm on the phone with my boyfriend, scared out of my mind. It's late, it's dark, I'm alone, and there's some guy following me through the city in a sketchy part of town. I hang out with my boyfriend and call 911, but I'm now on the interstate, so Metro PD has to transfer to Highway Patrol. By this time, I think I've lost him, because he saw me in my phone and went around. I get to the next exit, and there is his Infiniti on the shoulder of the road. He spots my car and swoops in behind me again. Fortunately, I spoke into Highway Patrol, and an officer is waiting 3 exits up at a gas station for me. I haul ass to that gas station, because it's the only option I have. I exit the interstate and pull into the gas station with the Infiniti hot on my heels until he sees the cop car. He cuts out off the gas station and hops back on the interstate the opposite way we were going back towards the city instead of out of it. A truck driver pulls in right after that, and I can't thank him enough. He noticed the guy jump in behind me and heard the call to Highway Patrol over the scanner, so he stayed behind him to make sure I was safe. Turns out he was a former military police officer and got a full plate number and gave it to the officer. They arrested the guy the next day. Turns out he was a rapist, following women home from work and then raping them in their driveway or home, and he was escalating in his level of violence. The girl he raped the night before was in critical condition from the beating she sustained. So, to the truck driver that was concerned, thank you. I hope we meet again, so I can properly thank you for helping me out. And to the Highway Patrol officer, thank you as well. I'm glad we've met again, and I was able to buy you dinner to the creepy rapist in the Infiniti. I now have a gun locked and loaded at all times on me, so it's best we don't meet again. The Man in the Alley. I've been a long-time lurker of no sleep and let's not meet for a long time. I've been deciding whether I should post this story or not, but I suppose I have nothing to lose, so I'll post it. I live on the Californian Central Coast in this little beach town about 2 hours away from San Francisco. It's not very big, but it does get a lot of tourist attraction during the summer. This happened in November. I'd gone to a small punk show at a local venue downtown. It had ended at around 1 a.m. Downtown is incredibly known for its abundance in homeless people. I don't usually acknowledge them for safety reasons. I'm sure being a female and walking downtown at 1 a.m. surrounded by homeless people isn't the best idea, but the show was definitely worth it. I parked at a parking structure a few blocks away. In order to get there, I had to walk through this dark, empty alley. It was then that I noticed him. I'm used to homeless people squatting in alleys due to its low activity during the nighttime, but this time it was a bit strange. There was a homeless man standing in the middle of the alley. He had a balding head, but his beard was thick and wiry. He had this light brown sweater, which I'm guessing used to be white, and he was wearing these green pants that were ripped at the knees. He looked a bit older, but looked pretty abled. He had his hands to his chest as if he were hurting. I remember internally debating whether I should ask him if he was okay or not, but I was too afraid. I decided to take another route to the parking structure. The other one took a lot more and required me to cross the road, but I really did not want to walk by the homeless man. As I started to turn my back on him and proceeded to the parking structure, I heard him scream. It was the most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard in my entire life. It sounded like he was in pure agony. I don't know how to describe it, but I can hear it as clearly as I did that night. It was an awful experience. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, and I went stiff with fear. My heart was pounding against my chest. Each scream bore deep into my spine. I remember looking back at the man. He was still screaming, but as I looked back, I saw he was violently flailing his arms. Just think of those inflatable air dancers, like the one used to attract customers at a car dealership and things like that. I thought he was having some sort of panic attack. I was so afraid I really didn't know what to do. A part of me wanted to run away and never look back, but another part of me wanted to see what was wrong. He continued screaming, stopping every few seconds or so to inhale and then scream. His arms looked like ropes. The look in his eyes was terrifying. They were blank. They had absolutely no expression. I remember tapping him on the shoulder and asking him what was wrong. He stopped flailing and screaming. He looked directly at me. I was shaking and I felt cold sweat run down my back. I honestly have never been so scared in my entire life. It all felt like a bad dream. His eyes were completely blank as he looked right at me. I didn't know whether to look down or meet his glance. I decided to meet his stare to let him see that I wasn't afraid, even though I was scared shitless. Then his face spread into a grin. A weird grin that didn't even seem proportional to his face. And then he started laughing, as if he had heard the greatest joke of the century. I stood directly in front of him, feeling uncomfortable in his presence. I started to back away slowly. His feet followed. He continued to laugh, harder and harder each time. I think his laugh was far more terrifying than his scream. What really shook me was that his laugh started more and more to resemble like a cry. You know, when you get hysterical sometimes, and you start to laugh and cry at the same time, that's what he was doing. Only that his cry sounded so sad and so painful. I couldn't stand it anymore. It was like a sob. I remember booking it out of the alley. The last thing I heard was another painful scream that shattered my eardrums. When I got to the parking structure, I got into my car and drove away as fast as I could. I've never taken the alley to go to the parking structure since then. To be completely honest, I don't even venture out to downtown in the after hours anymore. I like to think that the homeless man was enduring some type of drug relapse or that he was on drugs. I mean, it's really common, but I can't ever forget his screams and the way they rang in my ears or his manic flailing. It didn't even seem real to me. And sometimes I like to tell myself that it wasn't real. The house in Australia. This happened about 4 years ago when I was 19. I was allowed by my parents to take over managing a little house we had in the middle of bumfuck nowhere, which we used to rent out to people throughout the year. There was a manager's house about 3 kilometers away where I lived during this time. Originally, my father and I would meet the tenants and then come stay in the manager's house for the first week, and then 2 days out of every month that followed to make sure that everything was okay. As I was a teenage girl, my parents were a little hesitant to start letting me take over by myself, but Dad got into an accident and Mom had to take care of him, so they stayed at home while I lived in the manager's house full time. as I wanted to move out of home finally. The first 2 lots of people who rented the house under my supervision were great. There was a family of 4 who stayed March till June, and then a young lesbian couple who stayed up until November. After 2 such successful tenants, my parents and I had pretty much calmed down, and we stopped worrying that one day I might get some creeps who would murder me or would use the house as a drug den or something like that. It was with my guard thoroughly dropped that I arranged for a couple to stay for the month. We spoke via email and they seemed pretty normal. Joe and Laura, husband and wife in their late 40s, who were looking to rent for a month to see if the country life was for them. So, after 2 weeks of emailing, the day comes that I'm meeting them in person at the house they'll be renting for the next few weeks. When the car pulled up, Joe flashed me a smile through the windshield and then jumped out of the car to come shake my hand, while Laura went to the boot of the car for something. Joe was probably only 2 inches taller than me, a bit of a belly, thinning hair, and smelled like cloves. All in all, not threatening in the least. His face was surprisingly unlined, which made him look a little younger than he was, but also vaguely disturbing. No crow's feet or laugh lines, as though he never smiled enough to have etched them into his face. If you go on the internet, you can find articles about a woman who hasn't smiled in 40 years, and it gives her appearance, which makes a lot of people a little uncomfortable. It's though your brain is saying there's something not quite right about a person with no lines on their face. Standing there talking to Joe was the single most horrifically uncomfortable experience of my life. It's often said that if you meet a true psychopath, you'll know it, and then you'll ignore the feeling and soon forget about it. The most common theory is that they don't give out the unconscious signals that everyone else does when interacting with people, and that your own mind picks up on its lack and tips you off about the fact that something isn't right. And then, of course, the psychopath will be as charming as they always are, and you'll feel like you're being silly and push the feeling away. The second Joe approached me, my whole body went on high alert. He made a "do you take car" joke before handing me the cash for the month, and he said a lot of very complimentary things about the house and the bush around us. But the whole time, I just could not shake the feeling that there was something very, very wrong about him. Laura came over and introduced herself, and the feeling just got worse, to the point that it was, instead of offering to make them some tea and show them around the property, I just handed over the keys and told them to call if they needed anything. Joe gave me another smile as he said goodbye, but I noticed that it didn't reach his eyes. I almost threw up on the spot. I never told my parents about how much they scared me, but I did tell some friends, so they know who to blame if I got murdered one night. And Joe and Laura never contacted me through the rest of the month. I spent those weeks double-checking every door and window before going to bed, and several times convinced friends to stay with me because I was too afraid that Joe and Laura would come for me in the night, even though they had never been at all threatening. The day after they were meant to leave, I brought 3 male, very tough friends with me to check the house. The keys were left on the kitchen table, along with a short note thanking me for the privacy I gave them and an extra $100. On our website, they left a short but positive review about the house and made a special mention of the beautiful and helpful manager whose attitude and care made the whole experience that much more unforgettable. We'll be thinking of you often, dear, which I promptly deleted before getting incredibly drunk and crying about it. To Joe and Laura, thank you for the extra $100, but for the love of all that is holy, please let us never meet again.